Good morning. As I turn off the crazy funky music that brings us all into this moment. Good morning and welcome to Coffee and Comms. That's what we're calling these, Coffee and Comms. I've got my coffee. Do you have your coffee? For those of us who are joining in other parts of the world, you can put whatever you want to into this mug. We don't know. We don't know. And you might need something in this mug for this topic. Preparing for performance reviews. We've got different titles for this. It could be called a performance review. We can call them connects. We can call them, there's a lot of different ways that we talk about this moment where we're walking in and saying, hi, do you see me? It's my time to advocate for myself and tell you everything that I've done at this company and why I deserve something, whatever it is that you're asking for. Now, in these times, we might think, how am I supposed to ask for something that I want right now? It feels a little bit uncomfortable. I can understand that. And, sometimes these things that we want take a long time to make happen. So it's best to start now and start thinking about how do I talk about what I want at work. And then from the reviewer side, the people who are sitting across the table from someone who's in a performance review, how do we navigate that moment? Both of these moments are what we call high stakes communication moments. That's what we do at Lang International. That's what we're experts in. And today I'm going to take you through some tips and tricks on how to get ready for your performance reviews. So let's first talk about the reviewee, the person who is saying, hey, what are you going to say about me? What's happening in this review? So there are 4 things that we're going to talk about today that you can write down and keep in mind as you get ready for this moment. The first is courage, and we'll talk about what that means. Then clarity for what you want, how you react, and then what you respond with. So courage. Now we'll start with this. What are the stories you're telling yourself? Well, the National Science Foundation talks about what are the thoughts that are running through our head before we have one of these high stakes moments. And guess what? They're not positive. And you've probably already heard me talk about this, but 90% of these thoughts are negative and 80% are on repeat. So it's a negative thought and you're saying it over and over and over again to yourself. And then you walk into this moment that you have to say, hi, I'd like a raise, or I'd like more headcount, or I'd like to be given more responsibility or less responsibility, or I want Fridays off, whatever it is, the thoughts in your head are not full of positive commentary. So we have to start with getting ourselves ready for this moment so we can dig deep and have the courage to advocate for ourselves. So that's where we come back to this activity that you've probably seen us do before. Our clients really find this easy to use and grounding to get ready for these high stakes moments. Lift, lighten, and settle. You inhale, a meditative inhale, and then you lighten by telling yourself something that brings you joy. And I recommend making it silly. You've heard me talk about chocolate chip cookies. Think about a funny comic or something silly your children do, but something that would put a smile on your face and make you laugh. And it has to be silly. So lift, lighten, think about that silly thing that puts you in that state of, hey, this is not my world. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of other things about who you are than this moment in time, but we make it so important. Like, I am about to have my review and oh my gosh, what's going to happen? No, you're holistically a bigger person than this particular moment. So think of something that makes you smile and brings you joy. So then we say, okay, I'm thinking about something that joy, I'm getting ready. You have to ask yourself, are you assuming a reality about the review and people advocating for you and what's going to happen? And I find that you'll hear me talk about some of the gender differences that we've noticed over the years, but I find that a lot of us make assumptions about what's going on in the background of particularly these large organizations that we work in, where we say, oh, I've already advocated for myself a year ago, so it's going to happen in this next review, or I've already mentioned it a couple times and it's going to happen in 6 months. But there's this balance between, okay, how much do I say, hey, I want to be promoted to the point I'm being annoying, versus just getting what you want out there. So these are some realities, and I want you to just take a look at these and say, am I making these assumptions? And if I am, how do I need to change these? And again, feel free, comments any questions that you have throughout. There is a little delay on StreamYard, but I'd love to answer any questions that you have live. So the first is my work speaks for itself. This is the meritocracy. Did you see what I did? Let's acknowledge that. The second is, well, my boss is going to do this for me. Well, your boss has got some other things going on. So maybe they will, maybe they won't, and maybe they don't know how. So we have to make it easy for them to advocate for you. Then we say, a conversation is enough. One conversation, maybe with data, maybe without data, maybe with stories. Is it one conversation, and how many conversations, and who else in that conversation needs to hear about what you're doing and why it matters? And then this idea of, I work with a lot of teams. There's a lot of people out there who know you. Yeah. Are they the right people? I love that Hamilton expression, in the room where it happens, right? Where they sing that song, the room where it happens. Who's in the room where it happens? Who's in the room where the conversations are happening about what you want and why you should get it, or how we reorganize our organization, how we think about roles differently. So thinking through, what is the political landscape of my organization? Who needs to know this? We don't want to get to the place where we're constantly promoting ourselves. Or, I did hear one story about, well, I happen to know that this VP, who is really a big person for me to know at my organization, tends to go to the bathroom between these hours, and maybe I should just follow them in there. No, we're not doing that. Like, we're not going to follow somebody into the bathroom and say, hey, I'm looking for a raise. That's not what we're looking for. But to just make sure that you know who's going to be involved in this decision. So, are you some morality? Are you walking in with that positive train of thought in there? And then it's time to get clear about what you really want. So what is it that you want, and why do you deserve it? And then how do you structure the conversation? Because I think that's one of the hardest parts, is to say, I don't even know how to ask for this. So you have to first know what is in your repertoire. Like, when you think, what do I know about what I've done? Now, this has a lot of commentary about women, and women needing a brag sheet, and women needing to advocate for themselves. I'm not saying that this is not also true for men. I do know that women often have a harder time bringing all of their accomplishments forward. So do you have a brag sheet? Are you putting this in a cloud-based document where you're laying out, here are the things that I've done, and specific examples and stories that you can tell? So that's the first step. Know why you deserve what it is that you're asking for. Then we look to structure. What is it that you want to say? So you write it down first by saying, what is it specifically that you're asking for? Are you asking for a raise? Are you asking for a promotion? Are you just asking for a title bump with neither of these? I mean, in a lot of cases, you realize, I just want to be a director with the label director. It doesn't have to be a leveling up inside my organization, because I want external validation for my role. So what is it specifically that you want? What are the reasons that you deserve this? And what is it that is your company is going to do this for you right now? What are they going to get out of it? Now, this is a big one. And this is often where we run into some challenges, because we're saying what we want, but then we don't say, so what? So here's the structure we use. First is, I'm asking for a title bump externally, so that when I'm with clients, I get as much share of voice at the table as somebody who has my title somewhere else. Okay, simple, right? So what? Now, this is where we say, and we've done this a lot of times at Lang International, we're coaching people on this message, and we usually hear things like, well, I've worked really hard over the last year, and I've gone above and beyond. Okay, that's great. That's what you've done. But what did they get out of giving you this ask? So I'm looking for an external title bump. And the reason that I want this, and because I think I deserve this, is that externally, I'm going to have more credibility to be able to bring the conversations forward and close the deal. The reason this is so important right now is that we are in an incredibly challenging sales environment. Having that title to help me close faster is going to bring more money into our company. And then you stop talking. So this is the structure that you'd want to think about putting your ask around, wrap it around this, and these two critical components of, what are they going to get? when they give you what you want, and then why, given the market environment and everything that's going on in the world, is this so important right now? These are two really important pieces to this. Then after we have done that, we've said, okay, I asked for what I want. And you'll notice a really important part in here is this. All right, we've asked for what we want, and then we have to wait and say, what now? Our reaction. How do we react? So now we have to ask the question, I'm going to ask for this. I'm going to ask for an external title bump, or am I going to ask for a raise? I'm going to ask for more time off. What's going to happen? So think about this. What might you hear after you get this? And a lot of the things we hear today are, we're in resource constrained environment. This is not the right time. I don't have the headspace available. I mean, we've probably heard a lot of these. So when you get that, which feels maybe like a rejection, what do you do physically? And one of the first things that we do is we stop listening. We stop listening. We put our arms over our chest. We think we might, I haven't seen the rolling of the eye. I know that when my daughter asks me for things and I may or may not say yes, there's a big rolling of the eye. So I don't know if I've seen that so much in a corporate environment, but what is going on physically and how do we need to react? So the first thing we want to think about is, what are we doing with our bodies? What are our, for lack of a better expression, tells? Do we have a tendency to pull back, physically pull back? And if you do, and if you notice this about yourself, force yourself to lean forward. That will change your mindset and it will change what comes out of your mouth. So focus on what's going on physically, listen without judgment, because a lot of times the minute we hear, well, I don't know, we're already thinking this isn't going to happen for me. There's no way. And we judge the moment. So we want to think about listening without judgment. Don't get defensive. Don't get defensive with your words as well as your body. Breathe and enjoy the silence and then pause. So those are strategies for how we can react in this moment. And if you'll notice what I said before about that structure, it says on your phone. So you ask for this, you pick up your phone, you record it, you watch it. Watch it, watch how you respond. And then just for fun, imagine that someone's saying no. And then how would you respond? So think about your physical and how you react. Then interact. And after you've reacted, leaning in, smiling, asking questions, let's get into the feedback. So let's say you ask for what you want and you start to receive feedback. Well, it's not the right time, or you haven't shown this behavior, you haven't shown this skill, or you don't have the executive presence. Now, some of you might have heard, we talk a lot about this, where we get this very vague feedback. You don't have the executive presence. You don't come across strategically, or you don't have the strategic thinking. That's one I love, because what does that mean exactly? You could benefit from more assertiveness in meetings. Okay, so you're going to get feedback that is vague, and we need to have the courage to make sure that we're driving clarity. So this sheet right here, this slide, is a cheat sheet for how to ask questions around, what did you see me do that makes you feel like I'm not being assertive? Or what did you hear me say? So coming back and asking these questions, understanding what the impact was. So it's not just one person saying this, but this is also other people who are mentioning this, and what are they saying? And then finding out what you can do to change. And I love the question, can you show me someone who you feel exhibits these behaviors that I could model my behavior after? Because you don't want to become someone new, but you want to be able to role model behaviors that are positive and see them in action. So this is where you say, okay, I've reacted. Now I'm going to inquire, and then you get into dialogue. Now, here's another thing for the reviewee before we move on to the reviewer to pay attention to. When you hear, hey, let's come back to this, come back to it. Set a date, set a time. Understand when you're going to get that clarity about what's going to happen around your ask. So that's for the reviewee. Now let's move on to the reviewer. What are some best practices and things we need to keep in mind? Now I'm going to move through this very quickly, not because the reviewer is any less important than the reviewee. That's not it. But we want to make sure a lot of the things we can pull from the reviewee feedback and techniques into what the reviewer is dealing with. So this is not always an easy moment, right? We don't like saying no. We don't like telling people they can't have what they want or what they feel they deserve. So first of all, just know that it is hard. And for the reviewees listening, know that that's hard. That's hard for your manager and your boss to tell you, no, we don't want to do that. So as a reviewer, what are some things that we need to keep in mind? One is really taking that time to understand their perspective, be specific with feedback, validate emotions, and then follow up and make that a priority. So this is a little cheat sheet that you might have seen before around their perspective, but we find it so helpful. What is your objective? What is theirs? And then you write down just before this meeting, this takes you 2 minutes. What is their think, feel, do? They think, oh my gosh, I'm burned out. I'm worked too hard. I've lost my team and I need more time. What is your perspective? I need to get this work done. We've got to meet our quota. We've got to show that we're really functioning well as a team. So write all this down. It really helps to ground you before you have this conversation on where's this person coming from. And particularly in these columns, that feel section is so important because those are the emotions that are going to come forward. And those are the emotions that you are going to have to manage. So paying attention to this, write this down. Then here's some best practices on do's and don'ts. We know a lot of this. Turn your camera on if you're not in person, etc. The one I really want to focus on is the third one down, which is the yes and stance. Yeah, but immediately puts people at defensiveness. Where you say, yeah, but you haven't. Yeah, but you. Yeah, but I start to think I have to defend myself. We know this from improv. We know this from many of you probably have been through great communication courses where they teach this. This is one that's easy to extract from your conversations. Take the but out and keep that and in. Then we move into, all right, so we know the do's, we know the don'ts, come back to feedback. When you're about to give somebody feedback, going back to this chart that I shared for the reviewees, as a reviewer, are you about to give feedback that's not specific? So when someone asks you, hey, what did you see that makes you believe that I'm not assertive enough to get this promotion? Be prepared to respond. And if you don't know, it's okay to say, I love that question and I'm going to get back to you. Now, I mentioned before, we do have a lot more data for feedback when it pertains to women as compared to men. So here's an article that we'll share with you online that talks about the fact that we have a tendency to receive more actionable feedback that men do than women. So this is even more important to get specific about what is the behavior that you're seeing, what are the behaviors that you're noticing that are holding this individual back. So get very specific and measurable in your feedback. And if you don't know it, because it's a gut feel, make sure that you follow up. So we think about the feedback and then we have to say, all right, now what is going to get in the way of leaving this relationship in a positive light? And what are some things we need to avoid? So these are some of my favorite conversation stoppers. And I hear these from anybody, including people in my life. And I think, oh, this drives me crazy. And for a lot of you, this might drive you crazy too. Things like I was saying, yeah, but I assumed, if you remember, you just. So if you find yourself going into the language when you're in the middle of a review, I just don't have the resources. I just think about different ways that you can structure the conversation so that you're avoiding this. Because again, this is a tendency to put people on the defensive and they feel like they're not being listened to. That is the most important thing, is that you want your reviewee to walk away from this performance review and say, I was seen and heard. I didn't get what I wanted, but I was seen and heard. And these are things that are going to get in the way of that. As we wrap up, there's one follow-up thing that is really important, which is, are you okay? So coming out of this conversation, who do you need to follow up with? What is it that you need to say or do? And do you need to do anything at all? So after the conversation, after you've talked about this, think about what's next and ask the question, what would be most helpful for you as we move forward? And get them to tell you and get specific and get measurable so you can walk away feeling good about how you showed up as a reviewer. And as we transition to my last slide, and how you show up as a reviewee. So the purpose of this 20 minutes of coffee and comms were to give you, as you can see, a lot of new ideas and content around how do you get ready for this moment? It is high stakes. It is important. It's your life. It's your career. So you want to show up as the best version of you. You deserve some things. What are they? And what is it that you want? And why does it matter to the person you're asking and their team and their organization? And as the reviewer, make sure that you walk away making sure that person feels seen, heard, and listened to. Thank you all so much for joining Coffee and Comms. We're excited for our next month's session. We're going to be talking about the power of storytelling and how it can transform an entire communities, you name it. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Thank you so much for joining and have a wonderful day or evening, depending on where you are.